My wife was cheating on me with her cousin. I showed proof to her family, and her father got me a good job. But after the divorce, they took all. Hey Reddit, I'm really struggling with what's been happening in my life lately, and I feel like I'm losing my mind. I'm hoping if I get this all down, maybe someone out there can help me make sense of it. So, let me start from the beginning because I just need to get it all out. I've been married to my wife, Jessica, 32F, for about 6 years. We met back in college through a mutual friend, and we hit it off instantly. She was everything I wanted. Funny, gorgeous, and it felt like she truly understood me in ways no one else ever had. Things moved pretty fast between us, and within 2 years we were married. At the time, I couldn't have imagined a better partner. It honestly felt like I had hit the jackpot. I had just landed my dream job as a project manager, and Jessica had a solid career in marketing. Life was good. We were both focused on building our careers, traveling together, and just enjoying every moment. There were no red flags, no reason for me to doubt anything. I also had my best friend, Mike, 35M, who I've known since high school. He was more like a brother to me than just a friend. We had been through everything together. Bad breakups, crazy nights out, you name it. I trusted him with my life. He was even the best man at our wedding, and Jessica adored him too. It felt like I had the perfect setup. A loving wife, a solid career, and a loyal best friend. What could go wrong, right? Well, a lot, apparently. Things started to change about 1.5 years ago, right after Jessica gave birth to our son, Ethan, who's 18 months old now. At first, I chalked it up to the typical stress of being new parents. We were both exhausted, barely getting any sleep, and trying to balance work with taking care of a newborn. But then I started to notice little things that didn't sit right with me. Jessica seemed more distant, and I tried telling myself it was just the baby blues or something. But then there was her phone. She got weirdly protective over it. Now, Jessica has always been a pretty private person, but this was different. She used to leave her phone lying around without a second thought, but lately it was always with her, even when she went to the bathroom. She changed her passcode, something she had never done before, and if I ever asked to use it, she'd get defensive and make up some excuse. At first, I shrugged it off. I mean, why wouldn't I trust her? We were married, we had a kid, and she was the person I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. But over time, those little things started adding up. That nagging feeling in my gut just wouldn't go away. I'd see her sitting there, smiling at her phone, typing away late at night, and when I'd ask who she was talking to, she'd always brush it off, saying it was work or that she was just chatting with her mom. I tried to believe her. I wanted to believe her. But then one day, I noticed she was texting way more than usual, and every time her phone pinged, she'd light up, like she couldn't wait to respond. That's when my suspicion really started to creep in. About 3 months ago, something happened that I'll never forget. One night, she left her phone on the kitchen counter while she went to take a shower. That was strange. She hadn't let that thing out of her sight in ages. I don't know what came over me, but something inside me, call it intuition or just pure anxiety, told me I needed to check. I knew her new passcode because I had seen her enter it a few times before. I'm not proud of it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. With my heart pounding, I picked up her phone, knowing full well I was crossing a line I couldn't undo. And what I found shattered me. There were messages from someone saved under the name Emma. The thing is, I knew she didn't have any close friends named Emma, so right away, something felt off. I scrolled through the conversation, and my stomach dropped. These weren't just casual messages. They were intimate, flirty, and full of suggestive comments. They were talking about meeting up again, about how much they missed each other. One message from Emma even mentioned how much they enjoyed their last time together. But as I kept scrolling, things got worse. I came across a message from Jessica where she mentioned a specific meeting spot. The Willow Inn, a small boutique hotel about half an hour from our house. She even mentioned the exact time, Friday at 7 p.m. That's when it all hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just harmless flirting. This was a full-blown affair. My mind started racing, trying to make sense of everything. Part of me wanted to storm into the bathroom and confront her right there, But another part of me, probably the more cautious side, knew I needed more proof. I needed to know who Emma really was because I had a sinking feeling it wasn't a woman at all. That night, I hardly slept. Jessica came to bed like everything was normal, and I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling like my entire world was crumbling. I couldn't believe the woman I loved, the mother of my child, could betray me like this. But what made it even worse? I had this horrible suspicion that whoever she was meeting at the Willow Inn might be someone I knew. Friday came around, and I decided to play it cool. I told Jessica I'd be working late that night, and the second I said it, I could see the relief in her eyes, like it was all part of her plan. She told me she was meeting a friend for dinner but didn't offer any more details. And I didn't push her. Instead, I got ready. I left work early, drove to the Willow Inn, and parked a few blocks away so she wouldn't spot my car. And then I waited. Around 6:45 p.m., I saw her car pull into the parking lot. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my hands were trembling as I watched her step out. She looked beautiful, dressed up like she was going on a date. And then it hit me hard. That's exactly what this was, a date, just not with me. But what came next? That was the real gut punch. Not long after Jessica parked, another car pulled into the lot, and I instantly recognized it. It was Mike's, my best friend, the guy I had trusted for over 15 years, the guy who had been there through everything, good times and bad. He parked, got out of the car, and walked right up to Jessica. They hugged, not like friends, but like lovers, and then they walked into the hotel together. I sat there, frozen in shock, staring at the two people I trusted most in the world betraying me right in front of my eyes. Couldn't believe it. My wife was cheating on me with my best friend. It was like the ground had been ripped out from under me. As much as I wanted to run up and confront them right then and there, I knew I had to be smart about it. I didn't want some screaming match in the parking lot where they could deny it, or worse, gaslight me into thinking I was crazy. No, I needed proof, something undeniable. So, I pulled out my phone and started recording. I got clear footage of them walking into the hotel together, holding hands. That was step one. Step two? Figuring out how to confront them in a way they couldn't wiggle out of. I went inside and checked into the hotel under a fake name, pretending to be a businessman in town for a conference. I knew from the messages I'd seen earlier that they had booked a room on the 3rd floor, so I requested a room nearby. My plan was simple. I'd wait until they were in the room together and then I'd knock. I wanted to see their faces when they realized they'd been caught. I wanted undeniable proof, their reactions on camera. As I sat in my room, waiting for the right moment, my mind was racing. I thought about all the years of friendship with Mike, the laughs we shared, the trust we built, and Jessica, the woman I thought I knew, the mother of my child. How long had this been going on? How could they do this to me? At around 7:30 p.m., I heard movement outside my door. I peeked through the peephole and saw Jessica and Mike walking down the hall, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. They were so oblivious, completely unaware that I was just a few feet away, ready to blow up their lives. I waited about 10 minutes, long enough for them to settle into their room. Then, with my phone in hand, I walked out of my room and knocked on their door. My heart was pounding, and my head was spinning, but I was ready. Mike opened the door, looking confused at first, like he wasn't sure why someone was knocking. But then his face changed. That confusion turned to pure horror when he realized it was me standing there. Jessica was right behind him. Her face was pale, eyes wide with shock, standing there frozen behind Mike. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, still recording the whole thing. But then, before I could even speak or confront them, I heard a sound that made my heart stop cold. A baby crying from inside the room. This wasn't Ethan's cry. It was the sound of a much younger baby. I couldn't think straight. My mind was spinning, and before I knew it, I shoved past Mike and stormed into the room, desperate to make sense of what was happening. There, in the corner of the room, was a crib. Inside it, a newborn baby. I turned to Jessica, and she immediately started sobbing, begging me to let her explain. But nothing she could have said would have made this any better. After seeing them walk into that hotel together, every part of me wanted to burst in and confront them right then and there. But I forced myself to hold back, to think clearly. I knew I needed more than just accusations. I needed undeniable proof. If I acted too soon, they could still spin some lie, deny everything, and make me look like the crazy one. So I waited, hidden, biding my time for the right moment to catch them in the act. From my room, I could hear muffled voices and soft laughter coming through the thin hotel walls. After what felt like an eternity, the laughter stopped, and everything went quiet. Then I heard faint moans. My blood ran cold. There was no mistaking what was happening in that room. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone, determined to record everything. I wasn't going to let them gaslight me this time. Luckily, the room they were in had a window that faced the alley behind the hotel, and my room's window was right next to theirs. I climbed out onto the narrow ledge separating the windows, trying my best not to make any noise. Carefully, I positioned myself so I could peer into their room without being seen. My heart pounded in my chest as I pulled out my phone and started recording. Inside the room, Jessica and Mike were on the bed. She was lying on her back, her head tilted to the side, eyes closed, moaning softly. Mike was slowly kissing his way down her body. The sight of it turned my stomach, but I knew I had to keep filming. I needed to see just how far this betrayal had gone. Mike's hands were all over her, and as he shifted, they turned sideways, facing each other. What happened next was something I'll never be able to forget. They fell into the most degrading scene I've ever witnessed. They were completely intertwined, lost in each other, in a full 69 position. Jessica's moans grew louder, her hips moving in rhythm with Mike's tongue as he explored her. At the same time, her mouth was wrapped around him, moving in sync like they'd done this 1,000 times before. The intimacy between them, the way they seemed to know each other's bodies so well, it made it clear that this wasn't just some casual fling. This was deep, twisted, and it had been going on for a long, long time. I zoomed in with my phone, capturing every agonizing moment. The way their bodies moved together, the way Jessica responded to him with such ease. The next morning, I positioned myself near the parking lot where Mike had left his car. I wanted to see how they would act in the light of day, out in the real world, now that their dirty little secret was exposed, at least to me. I hid behind a nearby building, watching closely as they exited the hotel together. They looked completely relaxed, laughing and joking like they didn't have a care in the world. I followed them as they drove back toward our neighborhood. Mike dropped Jessica off a few blocks away from our house, far enough so no one would see her getting out of his car. The moment she stepped out, she leaned in and kissed him goodbye, then casually walked the rest of the way home, as if nothing had happened. When she arrived back at the house, I played along, pretending like everything was perfectly normal. I didn't mention the hotel, didn't mention Mike, and certainly didn't mention the baby I'd seen in that room. Instead, I greeted her with a smile and said, "Hey, I've been thinking about your upcoming birthday. How about we throw a big party this year? Invite all our friends and make it really special. You deserve it." Her face lit up instantly, completely unsuspecting. She agreed without hesitation, already buzzing with excitement, talking about the guest list, the decorations, and what kind of food we should serve. She had no idea what was coming. Over the next few days, Jessica threw herself into planning the party, spending hours making sure everything would be perfect. She even called Mike, asking him to help set things up on the day of the party. I let her handle all the details, watching silently as she unknowingly dug herself deeper into the mess she had created. Meanwhile, I was making my own preparations. I had a plan that would leave no room for excuses or denials. On the night of the party, I was going to reveal everything: the texts, the hotel footage, and the recordings of them together. I wanted them both to feel the full weight of their betrayal, and I wanted to make sure everyone else saw it too. I wanted to expose them in front of everyone they cared about. The day of the party finally arrived, and Jessica was practically glowing with excitement, running around the house, making sure every last detail was perfect. She looked stunning, of course, wearing the dress I had bought her for her birthday, a dress I now knew she had probably worn for him at some point. As guests started arriving, our house filled with laughter and conversation, the usual party atmosphere. Mike was there too, acting like nothing was wrong, as if he hadn't been sneaking around with my wife behind my back for months. I bided my time, waiting until everyone was comfortable, until the drinks were flowing and people were relaxed. When the moment was just right, I stood up in front of the room, tapping my glass to get everyone's attention. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I began, smiling at Jessica. "It really means a lot to Jessica and me to have all of you here to celebrate her birthday." She smiled back at me, completely clueless about what was coming next. "But before we get to the cake," I continued, pulling out my phone, "I have something I'd like to share with you all." Jessica's smile faltered, a look of confusion crossing her face, but she still had no idea. "I've been working on a little surprise for Jessica," I said, my voice steady. "You see, over the past few months, I've been documenting some things I think you all might find interesting." With that, I connected my phone to the TV and pressed play. At first, there were murmurs of confusion among the guests as they watched the footage of Jessica and Mike walking into the hotel together. But as the video continued and the truth became undeniable, the room went silent. Gasps and whispers filled the air as the guests saw what I had seen through that window. The affair, the betrayal, all of it laid bare for everyone to witness. Jessica's face drained of color, turning white as a sheet. Mike stood there frozen, unable to move or speak, like a deer caught in headlights. When the video finally ended, I turned to face them both. Jessica was sobbing now, her hands covering her face in shame, while Mike just stood there, speechless, as the room erupted into chaos. "I think that's enough of a birthday surprise, don't you?" I said coldly, shutting off the TV. The room exploded with angry voices, people pointing fingers, asking questions. Jessica, overwhelmed, tried to run out of the room, but I blocked her way. "Don't even think about leaving," I hissed, stepping in her path. "We're not done here." Mike, still trying to find his voice, stammered out weak excuses, but no one was listening to him. He looked around the room, desperate for someone, anyone, to defend him, but all he got were furious glares. I wasn't finished yet. "Oh, and Jessica," I said, turning back to her, "there's something else you should know." I pulled out my phone again, this time opening up the messages between her and Emma. I started reading them out loud. Every sickening lie, every flimsy excuse, and every disgusting detail of their affair. There was no hiding anymore. The party had turned into a public unraveling of their lies, and they had no way to escape. Everything fell apart after that. Jessica collapsed on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, while Mike tried to slip out the back door like a coward. I didn't stop him. I didn't care anymore. I had done what I came to do. The guests, shocked and uncomfortable, began filing out of the house one by one, unable to handle the sheer awkwardness of the situation. By the time the place was empty, Jessica was still curled up on the floor, crying her eyes out. I stood over her, but I didn't feel anger anymore, just a cold, numb emptiness. "You did this to yourself," I said quietly, then turned and walked out the door, leaving her behind. That's when I found out the final, devastating truth. The baby wasn't ours. It was theirs. After the chaos of that night, I didn't look back. Jessica and Mike were completely out of my life, and I had no intention of ever speaking to either of them again. The beginning was tough, I won't lie. Picking up the pieces wasn't easy, but with the support of close friends and my new girlfriend, Leah, I started rebuilding what was left of my life. Months passed since the party, and slowly, the dust began to settle. Leah was different. She wasn't just a rebound or a distraction from the wreckage my life had become. We connected on a deep level in a way Jessica and I never had. Over the last few months, things between Leah and me had gotten serious. We'd even started talking about moving in together, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like my life was finally back on track. One of the biggest turning points came when Jessica's father, Bill, reached out to me. Bill had always been kind, even after everything that went down between Jessica and me. He knew exactly how much his daughter had hurt me, and he knew I had been nothing but good to her. I think, in some way, he felt guilty for how it all turned out. One day, out of the blue, Bill offered me something I didn't expect. The house. It was worth about $150,000, a quiet place just outside the city, sitting on a lot of land. He said he didn't want it anymore and thought it would be the perfect spot for me to start over. At first, I wasn't sure if I should accept it. It felt strange, taking something from Jessica's father after everything that happened. But Bill insisted. He told me he was done with his daughter's selfishness and wanted to make things right. In the end, I accepted the offer, and shortly after, Leah and I moved in together. For the first time in a long time, things were looking up. We were building a new life in that house, creating something healthy and real. But then, one Saturday afternoon, a few months after Leah and I had settled into our new home, something unexpected happened. We were sitting outside, enjoying a rare sunny day, when the sound of a car pulling into the driveway caught our attention. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was a delivery or a neighbor stopping by. But when I looked up and saw the familiar silver sedan pulling in, my stomach dropped like a stone. It was Jessica and Mike. I hadn't seen either of them since that night, and now here they were, pulling into my driveway. The night of the party, they hadn't dared to reach out to me, and I had no reason to contact them. As far as I was concerned, they were dead to me. But now, here they were, standing on my front lawn, faces twisted with anger. Leah glanced at me, her eyes wide with confusion. "What the hell are they doing here?" she asked, her voice low but tense. "I have no idea," I muttered, feeling a knot of rage start to coil in my chest. I pushed myself up and walked toward them, my fists already clenched at my sides. Jessica wore that smug, self-righteous look I knew all too well, the same one she'd use when she thought she had the upper hand. Mike looked nervous, like he knew he shouldn't be there, like he knew this was going to go sideways. But still, they had come. "We need to talk," Jessica said, her voice icy, dripping with entitlement. I crossed my arms, standing tall. "What the hell do you want?" I shot back, my voice colder than I intended, but I didn't care. Jessica exchanged a quick glance with Mike, then locked her eyes on mine. "We want the house," she said, her words hitting me like a slap in the face. I blinked, stunned. "Excuse me?" "This house," she repeated, her tone full of venom. "It wasn't fair that my father gave it to you. It belongs to me and Mike. We deserve it more than you." The audacity of what she was saying made my blood boil. I took a step closer, my voice dangerously low. "Are you out of your goddamn mind? Your dad gave me this house after everything you did. You have no claim to it." "None." Jessica took a step forward, her face so close I could feel her breath, her eyes blazing with fury. "You didn't earn this. You don't deserve it. We want it back." Leah, standing by my side now, didn't miss a beat. "You can't just walk in here and demand a house because you think you're entitled to it," she said, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. "Bill gave it to him. This is now. You both need to leave." But Jessica wasn't finished. "We'll take it by force if we have to," she snarled, her lips curling into a cruel smirk. That was it. I felt the fury bubbling over, my fists tightening, but I held it together. Barely. "Get off my property, Jessica. Now!" Before I could say another word, Mike, who had been silently watching, lunged at me with all his weight. He grabbed my shirt, shoving me back with a force that caught me off guard. I stumbled, rage blinding me, but I quickly steadied myself. Without hesitation, I swung at him, my fist crashing into the side of his face with a sickening thud. He staggered back, but I wasn't done. I launched at him and we crashed to the ground, rolling through the dirt, fists flying. He landed a punch on my ribs that knocked the wind out of me, but I didn't care. I was fueled by pure rage. I wrestled on top of him, pinning him down, my fists pounding his chest as he struggled beneath me. "You think you can just take everything from me?" I snarled, my voice raw with fury. "You think you can walk into my life, wreck it, and now take what's left?" Mike grunted in pain, his face twisted as he tried to push me off, but I slammed my fist into his jaw again. Jessica screamed, trying to run toward us, But Leah stepped in, grabbing her arm and pulling her back, keeping her from interfering. "You ruined my life," I growled, my fists hammering down on Mike, who was barely defending himself now. "You think you can just show up here and take what's mine?" Mike's face was contorted in agony, but I didn't care. I wanted him to feel every ounce of pain, every betrayal, everything he had inflicted on me. He betrayed me in the worst possible way, and now he had the nerve to try and take what little I had left. Mike twisted his body, trying to throw me off, and as he did, his head hit the ground with a sickening crack. Suddenly, he stopped moving, his body going limp beneath me. I froze, the rage that had fueled me draining out in an instant. "Mike," I muttered, shaking him lightly, but he didn't respond. Panic surged through me as Jessica screamed again, running over to him. She shoved me off of him, cradling his head in her arms as she sobbed uncontrollably. "What did you do? What the hell did you do?" she shrieked, her voice filled with terror and rage. I backed away, my hands trembling. I hadn't meant for this to happen. I hadn't meant to hurt him like that. Leah was already on the phone with 911, calling for an ambulance, her voice calm but urgent. I stood there, frozen, watching in horror as Jessica tried desperately to wake Mike up, but he remained unconscious, a small trickle of blood pooling from the back of his head. Within minutes, the ambulance arrived. Paramedics rushed over, loading Mike into the back of the vehicle while Jessica continued screaming at me, her voice hysterical. She climbed into the ambulance with him, still sobbing, still accusing. And then they were gone, leaving Leah and me standing on the lawn, completely shell-shocked. I didn't know what to do. I hadn't meant for it to go this far. All I had wanted was to defend what was mine, to stand up for myself after everything they had put me through. But now everything was spiraling out of control. For the next few days, I barely slept. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Mike was in the hospital, recovering from a concussion and a fractured skull. Jessica stayed by his side the entire time, refusing to speak to anyone. But I knew it was only a matter of time before things escalated even further. And sure enough, they did. A few days later, I received a notice in the mail. Jessica was suing me for the house, claiming that I had illegally taken it from her and that her father had no right to give it to me. She was demanding that the house be returned to her, and she was prepared to take it to court to get what she wanted. Couldn't believe it. After everything that had happened, after all the damage she and Mike had done, she was still trying to take more from me. I immediately contacted Bill, Jessica's father, and told him what was going on. He was furious when he found out. "That ungrateful brat," he muttered over the phone. "I gave you that house because you deserve it. She has no right to it." Bill offered to help me fight the case in court. He hired the best lawyer he could find, determined to put an end to his daughter's ridiculous claims. I was grateful for his support, but I knew this wasn't going to be easy. Jessica was stubborn, and she wasn't going to back down without a fight. The court case dragged on for weeks. Jessica's lawyer tried to argue that Bill had been mentally unfit when he gave me the house, pushing the narrative that he hadn't been in his right mind. Jessica's lawyer tried to argue that Bill hadn't been in his right mind when he gave me the house, insisting the property rightfully belonged to her. It was a flimsy argument, but they were relentless in trying to make it stick. Bill, however, didn't hold back. He testified on my behalf, standing firm in court, stating clearly that he had given me the house of his own free will, and Jessica had absolutely no claim to it. He painted her as the selfish, entitled woman she'd become, someone who had never appreciated anything he had done for her. His words were cutting, and it was brutal to hear, but they were the truth. In the end, it worked. The judge ruled in my favor. The house was mine, fair and square. Jessica was livid. She stormed out of the courtroom without a word, her face twisted in fury. I stood there, watching her leave, feeling a wave of satisfaction wash over me. After everything she had done, this was justice. Mike didn't even show up to court. After his injury, he went completely silent, staying in the shadows, too ashamed or embarrassed to face me. With the court case behind me, Leah and I finally started to move forward. The house was ours, and Jessica and Mike were out of our lives for good. It wasn't easy, but we had each other, and that was enough to begin again. Bill and I remained close after the trial. He had cut ties with Jessica for good, telling me he was done with her manipulative, toxic behavior. He visited Leah and me often, helping with the house and offering advice whenever we needed it. It felt good to have him on our side, a father figure who genuinely cared about me, especially after everything that had happened with his daughter. As for Jessica and Mike, I had no idea where they had gone, and frankly, I didn't care. They had made their choices, and now they had to live with the consequences. I had spent far too long letting them dictate my life, and I was done. After the trial, things started to look up. The house was finally, officially mine, and Jessica and Mike were gone from my life, or so I thought. Leah and I settled into a peaceful routine. We spent our weekends exploring the countryside, making plans for the future, talking about how far we'd come. Bill was a regular visitor, coming over for dinners and helping with repairs around the house. Life felt normal again, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Then, about a month after the trial, just when I thought everything was finally behind me, I got an unexpected visit. It was a warm Saturday afternoon. Leah and I were lounging in the backyard, enjoying the sunshine, when the doorbell rang. I got up, walked to the front door, and froze. There he was, Mike, standing on my doorstep. He didn't look like the man I used to know. His hair was a mess, his clothes were wrinkled, and there were deep, dark circles under his eyes. He looked broken, hollow, nothing like the confident, self-assured guy who had betrayed me. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at him. All the buried rage and betrayal hit me like a truck, threatening to boil over. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper, his eyes downcast, unable to meet my gaze. I wanted to slam the door in his face. I wanted to scream at him, to throw him off my porch, to make him feel the pain and humiliation I had endured. But something in the way he stood there, so small, so pathetic, gave me pause. He wasn't the Mike I used to know. He was a shell of that man, and I could see the cracks. I wanted to slam the door in his face, to shut him out of my life forever, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the exhaustion carved into his face, the way his shoulders sagged in defeat. He wasn't the same smug bastard who'd walked into that hotel with my wife. He looked broken, hollow. Against every instinct screaming at me to turn him away, I stepped aside and let him in. Leah stayed outside, sensing the tension and giving us space. Inside, the air was thick with everything left unsaid. We sat at the kitchen table, the silence between us so heavy it felt like it could suffocate us both. My hands were clenched in my lap, heart pounding in my chest, waiting for whatever he had to say. "I know I don't deserve to be here," Mike began, his voice rough and cracked, like it hurt to get the words out. "But I need to apologize. I know saying sorry doesn't change anything, but you deserve to hear it." I stared at him, my jaw tight, saying nothing. I wasn't ready to forgive, but I could listen. "Jessica and I, it was a mistake," he continued, his voice shaking, barely holding it together. "I don't know why I let it go on so long. I ruined everything, our friendship, your marriage, and for what? It wasn't even real." His eyes dropped to the floor, and he rubbed his hands together nervously. After the trial, she spiraled. She blamed everyone but herself, became impossible to live with. That's when I realized I'd destroyed my life for someone who never cared about me. I ended it with her last week. I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction rise in my chest, but it was mixed with pity. He had thrown away everything for Jessica, and now he had nothing left. Mike's voice broke as he spoke again, this time quieter, more fragile. "Look, man, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know we'll never be friends again. But I need you to know how sorry I am. I hurt you in the worst way possible, and I'm going to regret it for the rest of my life." The silence that followed was suffocating. I sat there, staring at him, trying to process it all. I had hated Mike for so long, had lived off that hatred, but now, seeing him so broken, so filled with regret, it was hard to keep holding on to that anger. I couldn't forgive him, not yet, but I felt the fury that had once consumed me begin to fade. "I don't know what to say, Mike," I finally replied, my voice low but steady. "You're right, you don't deserve my forgiveness. But I don't hate you anymore." Tears welled up in his eyes as he nodded, his voice trembling. "That's more than I deserve. Thank you." Mike left not long after, and I didn't see him again for a long time. As he walked out the door, I felt conflicted, relieved that he had apologized, but the scars were still there, deep and raw. Part of me wanted to move on, to finally let go of the pain, but another part still felt wounded. It would take time, but at least the healing had begun. Years passed and life moved forward. Leah and I got married in a small ceremony with just close friends. We were genuinely happy, and I had pushed most of the past behind me. Bill remained a part of our lives, visiting often and treating me like a son. He had completely cut ties with Jessica, and as far as I knew, she had moved away, trying to rebuild her life after Mike left her. Things felt right, peaceful, and Leah and I had built something strong together. But peace is always fragile. Just when I thought I had buried the past for good, it came crashing back into my life with the force of a freight train. It was a normal day. Leah and I were walking back from the grocery store, laughing, talking about dinner plans. The sun was warm on our backs. Everything felt good, until the doorbell rang. We were walking back from the grocery store, laughing about some silly conversation we'd been having, when I noticed a young boy standing on the corner of the street. He couldn't have been older than 13 or 14, but there was something in the way he stared at me that sent a chill straight through my spine. His eyes were dark, filled with something I couldn't quite place, until he suddenly sprinted toward me. Before I could even process what was happening, he pulled a piece of rebar from under his jacket and swung it at me with everything he had. The first hit landed on my side, hard, knocking the wind out of me. I stumbled, gasping for air, completely caught off guard. But he didn't stop. He kept swinging, again and again, each blow hitting harder than the last. Leah screamed, trying desperately to pull him off me, but he was relentless. Blood poured down my face from a gash on my forehead as he continued to hit me, rage consuming him. "This is for my mom," he screamed, his voice filled with venom. "You ruined everything. She's been suffering because of you." That's when it hit me, even through the pain. This was Jessica and Mike's son. People started gathering around us, some pulling out their phones to record the scene, others calling for help, but no one dared to step in. Leah was sobbing, trying to get him off me, but he wouldn't stop. The blows kept coming, and I felt like I was drowning in pain, barely able to move. It wasn't until two men from a nearby shop ran out and tackled him to the ground that the beating finally ended. I lay there on the cold sidewalk, gasping for breath, my entire body screaming in pain. Leah was at my side, holding my hand, her face pale and terrified. The police arrived shortly after, arresting the boy and dragging him away. He was still screaming, still blaming me for his mother's suffering. His words echoed in my ears even after he was gone. I spent the next few days in the hospital, recovering from a fractured rib, a concussion, and bruises that left me aching all over. The whole thing felt surreal, like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The boy was sent to a juvenile detention center, and I couldn't stop thinking about how Jessica had allowed her son to become this. A boy filled with such hatred, so poisoned by lies that he thought I was the cause of all his pain. A few weeks later, as if the attack wasn't enough, I received notice that Jessica was suing me for her son's arrest. She claimed I had provoked him, that I had somehow caused the attack by ruining her life. The accusation was absurd, but the sheer audacity of it sent a wave of anger crashing through me. Jessica had done this. She had filled her son with hate, poisoned him against me, and now she had the nerve to blame me for the consequences. Bill was livid when he found out. "She's lost her damn mind," he muttered over the phone. "I'll help you fight this. She's not getting away with it." He hired the same lawyer who had helped me win the house case, and once again we found ourselves in court. This time, Jessica's case was even weaker than before. There was clear video footage of the attack, witness statements from people on the street, and Leah's testimony. I could barely believe that Jessica had stooped this low, that she had allowed everything to spiral so far out of control. But one thing was clear. She wasn't just trying to destroy my life anymore. Now she had poisoned her son, and it was him who was paying the price. It didn't take long for the judge to throw out Jessica's case entirely, but that wasn't enough for me. I was done being the victim in her twisted games. I countersued her for damages, claiming emotional distress and medical expenses from the attack. I wanted to send a clear message. She couldn't keep ruining people's lives with her bitterness and walk away unscathed. The trial was brutal. Jessica sat across from me, looking worn and tired, but her eyes still carried that same defiance. She tried to paint herself as the victim, saying that I had destroyed her life, that everything had gone wrong because of me. But the evidence was stacked against her. There was no denying the truth this time. Bill, her own father, took the stand and testified against her. He told the court how Jessica had filled her son with lies, turning him into an angry, violent child. His words were damning. In the end, I won the case. Jessica was ordered to pay my medical expenses, and her already fragile reputation was shattered even further. Her son remained in juvenile detention, and from what I heard, their relationship was strained after the attack. She had poisoned him, and now both of them were suffering the consequences. But winning didn't feel as satisfying as I had imagined. In fact, it left me feeling hollow. Jessica had destroyed everything around her, her marriage, her family, even her child, and now she was paying the price. But instead of feeling like justice had been served, it just felt sad. There was no victory here, only the wreckage of lives that had once meant something. Leah and I moved on with our lives. The attack had shaken us both, left scars that took time to heal, but we refused to let it define us. We focused on our future, building something strong and beautiful together. And for the most part, we succeeded. We created the life we had always dreamed of, a life free from the toxicity of the past. As for Jessica and Mike, I haven't heard from either of them since the trial. I assume they're still out there somewhere, trying to pick up the shattered pieces of the lives they ruined. But that's no longer my concern. I've moved on. I've healed. And for the first time in a long time, I'm truly happy.